who remembers this engine? This was the 420 that we put on the street go-kart, and we just removed the governor. We put the Go Power Sports air filter adapter and jet and exhaust on it, and we over revved it, and I'm pretty sure we bent a valve, because when you turn it over it blows a lot of compression out the valve cover vent, the PCV valve. So what we're going to do is be pulling it apart. I went on eBay and got some, pretty sure these are used valves, but some valves. I'm just really hoping these are for the Hemi and not for the non-Hemi. I don't know if there's any difference between the two heads, but I would assume the Hemi would have a little bit bigger valves. Who knows? We just got to pull it open and see. When we upgraded the street go-kart with chromoly push rods, I kept the old push rods, of course, just in case we bent a push rod, but I'm almost positive that we bent a valve in this engine. So we're going to be doing a pretty sweet build on this. This is going to be our high torque build. We got a billet rod from Go Power Sports for this engine. We're not doing a billet flywheel because we want to retain the electric start as well as the charging pulls. This will be an off-road build, so won't be in super high RPMs. So we're also going to be putting a high torque marine cam from Go Power Sports in it. I don't know if these cams are for sale yet, but we got it as a test unit to see how good it works. It's supposed to make max torque from 2,500 RPM to 5,500 RPM, I believe. And we'll be running a knockoff Key and Carb flat slide 34mm carb on this. So we'll be removing the stock carb, removing this throttle plate, set up this old throttle mechanism, and we'll be putting a top plate from Go Power Sports on it as well. So let's tear this thing down, get the head off, and look at those valves. So when we got this thing taken apart, you can see the silver line around the piston or the valve. It's pretty messed up. So there's a little mark on the piston as well, but it's not going to hurt anything. So this is the exhaust valve that I had ordered. If you look, you can see there's quite a bit of size difference. You can still, oh gosh, let me get it centered. You can see the silver around it. So this is a lot smaller. So I was like, what are the chances that the intake valve, which is the larger of the two, would work? And my luck would have it, this is a 34mm, this is a 35mm. So we do not have valves. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and put the billet rod, the balance shaft back in there, the new cam, bolt up the side cover, get everything done inside the engine. So when we get our valves, Go Power Sports is on the lookout for some valves right now. They're going to see if they can find me some, because this engine is just going to be shelved until that, and we got a big project we want to do with this engine, so that's unfortunate. But I have some valves for a non-Hemi 420 that I will never use, because if I have an opportunity to buy a Hemi versus a non-Hemi, I'm going to buy the Hemi. So now we can go ahead and throw the new billet rod from Go Power Sports onto the piston, and get the piston installed back in, torque down the spec. Then we can throw the cam, balance shaft, and get everything buttoned up on the inside of the engine. So we got the wrist pin pulled out. There's the rod, and you got to make sure the way this rod is orientated. The longer ear is on this side of the piston, which should have the arrow pointing down. Yes, it does. And you can see how that's shiny. That's where that valve was hitting the piston. So like I said, make sure your rod is pointing with the ear, the longer ear on the arrow side of the piston. We'll remember that. And there is our beautiful rod. So what we're going to do is go ahead, I'm going to put a little bit of oil on the wrist pin journal, and then slide the wrist pin back in. Then we can put our little circlip back inside there. And also, when you're installing a billet rod, you want to put it in a vise wrapped in a towel to break these bolts loose, because once the piston's on, it's kind of a pickle. So I'm going to go break these puppies loose. Make sure that clip gets completely seated into that little notch. Now this is a 280 lift cam. Now Grant at Kart Fab put one of these in a GX 390, and he said it's absolutely insane. But he said he had to do a lot of clearance in the block, that the cam lobes was hitting some stuff. So what we're going to have to do is get this piston installed back into the block, put this cam back into place, and I have taken a side cover. Now I'm going to recut one of these side covers. This will hold everything in place to make sure you're not going to hit anything, like your cam's not going to hit your rod and whatnot. But this side cover, I should have left the dowels on each side. That would have helped align it, but we're just going to try this. So there's also this little ear on the back of the block that's maybe like a oil windage, tray, so oil won't fly up and hit this governor arm and leak out maybe. But you do have to get rid of it, because the bolts on the billet rod, the rod bolts will actually hit that. So we're actually going to go ahead and pull the crankshaft out, because we're going to put a 6 degrees advanced flywheel key on this, and we can grind that out, clean everything out really well, and then reassemble everything. So we got this little side cover I've cut up to make sure we don't have any clearance issues. And if you see, the rod used to hit, look back in there where that top rod bolt is, you can see where it used to, there used to be a little plate there I had to grind off. So that was the only issue with clearance. We can go ahead and put the counterbalance and then the side cover back on, and then we can start putting our new valves that we finally found back in the head. These was on eBay. It took a little bit to find them. You have to look it up by size. So basically I put 420 in their size. I think it was 38 and 34, I believe. You can tell the difference between the ones I bought before. You can tell the size difference between a non-Hemi and a Hemi on both of them. So this was the valves I needed. We can get those put in, and our new 50-pound springs from Go Power Sports. And we're going to be putting a 32mm Mikuni on this. So we have our Mikuni adapter right there. I was going to do some head porting, but my die grinder has broken, so we will not be able to do that right now. So we're going to be putting the balance shaft back in this engine, and it's just like the crankshaft. You have a small dot milled into this and a small dot on the crankshaft, so we can line these puppies up like that, and our balance shaft is installed. You can see the difference between the two keys. The one over here is just a solid key. The other one is notched to advance the time in 6 degrees. You can get these in 2, 4, 6, or 8. I believe 8's the highest you can advance it. with these, and you can do a method where you use a timing chart and time the engine yourself, not using a key. Granted, Kart Fab shows us on this video, so you can check that out if you want to see that. I'm doing the easy route. I don't have a timing light and all that jazz, so we're just going to use a 6 degrees advanced key. Now you want the open side of this key pointing towards the head, so the notch side pointing towards the head. These can be a pickle to put back in. Just be careful, take your time. I use a flathead, you probably shouldn't. And just peck it in there and get it seated. What you want is basically the back of the key to be level with the crankshaft. Alright, so I'm going to add a second charging coil, so we will have even higher output charging on this engine. Now when you do this, you need to run a voltage regulator. We're going to try to use a 150 voltage regulator, but we need to take off this little plate here and run this wire with it, so it's out of harm's way and won't get caught up in the crankshaft. So that's just an 8mm. I'm going to use a little bit of red Loctite on these bolts so I can make sure they don't back out. Oh boy. So now we can pop this little grommet out. It already has a spot for a secondary cool. There we go. Slide that right back in the block. So when we install this flywheel, we want it rotated as much clockwise as possible against that key all the way. And what you'll have to do is use a little flashlight, look down the keyhole, and make sure it's all the way on that flywheel key. Now another cheap way to get performance in the meantime, like if you're saving up to buy a billet flywheel, you can cut every other fin off. And what I like to do, because I have messed these up, is take a Sharpie, draw on every one of every other fins, and then cut them off, because I've messed up and cut 2 in a row off. Don't know how, but I've done it. So just to be safe, you can do that, but I don't think I'm going to do that on this engine. And the flywheel nut. Now we can reuse our crankshaft stop and torque this down to spec. Oh yeah, that takes some torque right there, boy. So to clamp down my engine, I just used some wood clamps, clamp it down to my workbench, and then on the back side I used that crankshaft stop to keep it from turning, and I had to go buy a new torque wrench that would go up to 125 foot-pounds to torque that baby on there. So now we got to get our valve springs ready, so I'm going to get our compressor ready. Showed this on plenty of videos. This is an amazing valve spring compressor, so you can find the links in our Amazon link right under the description of the video. You don't need this for Predators like 212s, but you'll need it for like 50-pound springs and heavier. So you got one that clamps on the bottom of the valve, on the actual valve, and this goes on the retainer and pushes it down so you can get the keepers out. And you got to keep it from walking side to side. Normally I put this in a vise, but I'm over here where I build engines, so it's a lot easier doing it in a vise. We'll see how it'll try to walk with you. Just got to keep it centered, get it down enough. Use a magnetic screwdriver to get the split keepers out. The first one's always easy to get out. The second one will be in a little bit more. Oh gosh, dropped it. So we got both those keepers out. Now we can just let off of this compressor, and our spring and valve can slide right out of the head. So we got that spring and the cap off. Well, this was our bent valve. You can see where it had touched the piston. It didn't hurt the piston any, but it did some contact, that's for sure, and that's from floating the valve, not having the heavy valve springs. These are the stock valve springs that was in the engine. We didn't have any at the time. You can see you can compress them like crazy, where the 50-pound Go Power Sports springs, you're barely compressing those compared to the other. So we got our valve grinding compound, which is pretty much liquid sandpaper. Now we're going to place some around where the valve is going to be seated against the head. So you just want to do that a little bit until you think it's got a good seat. And that's just making it get a tight seal so you won't have any compression leaks. Now you want to make sure you clean every bit of that valve grinding compound off of the valve as well as the head. You can kind of see where it made the seal around the valve. So this is not going to leak any compression. So I'll start out torquing this to 15 foot-pounds, you know, swapping sides, doing a pattern, and then on the second round of torquing we'll do 20 and then 26. Let's start down here, and we'll have to clamp down the engine in just a second. Slide our push rods in, get them seated in the lifters. Come on, baby. Both of those are seated. So now we can put our lash caps on. Cannot forget the lash caps. And these pins go from the inside, and make sure the clips, the little circlips, don't catch on this little lip right here on the head. Now we can install our metal bracket that keeps the pins from sliding out. So we loosen that lock nut. Got our 4/1000 feeler gauge. Probably too much. It feels pretty nice. So that's got a good tension to it. You know, you don't want it where you can barely cram it in there, but you want it to, you know, just have a good amount of tension, and that the next size up won't fit in there. So that said, we'll repeat the process on the exhaust valve, setting it at 5/1000 of an inch. Now when setting the exhaust valve, you need to make sure you're not on the compression release. The compression release helps it to start easier. So what you're going to do is, when I rotate the engine, this is intake, this is exhaust. When I rotate the engine around, you'll see the exhaust valve is opening. Then you'll see the intake valve opening. After the intake valve releases, you can see the exhaust pushes just that little bit right there. You see how it's barely moving? You want to go right after that. That's where you want to set your lash. I hear a lot of people telling me that their engine is kicking back really hard after installing 18-pound valve springs or 50-pound springs, depending on the engine. That's because you probably set the valve lash while it was on the compression release. Now we have this, the exhaust, like I said, at 5/1000. Got a really good tight feel, and the intake at 4. I'm actually going to tighten the exhaust a little bit more because I want it just a little tighter on my feeler gauge. So we're going to do that, and then we can put the valve cover on. Now that our valves are adjusted, we can slap our valve cover on. Of course, using our Performance Engineering cup washers. These make any engine look sweet. Get that stud out, we'll remove the other one and start putting on the intake. So I actually got this engine done a long time ago. This video was filmed months ago, but I put that 32mm flat slide key in on there. It's a knockoff key and carb. These are like 40 bucks on eBay. They work okay. We've had one on the street go-kart for a while, so we're going to try it out on this engine as well. This was the original side cover that I made for the street go-karts engine. You remember I put the window in it for the billet flywheel. Well, when I went to paint this one, I did some clear coat, and if you can see the runs all in the paint right there, the clear coat was like extremely old and been on the shelf for a long time. So instead of repainting another one, I just pulled the side cover off this one, recut a new window, and finished the video for the street go-kart. So probably going to patch up the window hole because I don't want to show off a stock flywheel on this, and probably just throw it on there just like that. I don't really care about the runs on this engine. We also threw a top plate from Go Power Sports on this 420. Went ahead and put the little throttle mechanism plate back on just to duct the air across the head. And she's ready to go other than slapping the side cover on there. Now that engine is going to go on a Kemco 250 Mongoose four-wheeler, which is, they're a Chinese type four-wheeler, but they're actually a really good ATV. We bought this thing for $150 a long time ago just for the wheels and tires pretty much off of it, and the more I looked at it, it was in perfect shape. The seat is ripped, but other than that, the four-wheeler's in awesome shape. The engine on them are a liquid cooled 250 that is automatic with reverse. So someone has taken apart the transmission, I don't know why, and they lost a few gears. When I looked up a long time ago, we bought this four-wheeler like 2 years ago, so it's been sitting out back for like 2 years. Someone had taken the transmission apart. I don't know why, but they lost the gears out, and it's going to cost like $200 or $300 to get all the pieces for it. So when we pull the ATV in here, we're going to try to get it running first just by spraying some brake cleaner in the carb. If I can hear the engine run, then of course we'll keep that engine for a go-kart. We'll set the engine aside and we'll slap this 420 on that four-wheeler frame, because I've always wanted to see how a 420 would pull a four-wheeler with a high torque build. So that's the plans for this engine. We're going to do that very soon. Go Power Sports now has some 530 sprockets for their 40 series and 780 series torque converter sets. So we're going to be putting that big thick chain on it, because that's what the original sprocket is on the ATV. Got to get a few more parts and then we'll be slapping that thing on there. So stay tuned for that video. Thank you to everybody that came out to the meetup. It was a crazy turnout. I can't believe so many people drove down to see us. It's just an awesome time. We had a blast. We're going to edit up that video hopefully this week and get it out. I didn't film too much, you know. I was having so much fun meeting people, riding stuff, that I forgot to put GoPros on, like Lonnie's, what Lonnie was riding, what Brandon and Braxton was riding. But we had an amazing time. We can't wait to do it again. We're already planning the next one for springtime, so hope more people can come and have a blast with us. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for 100,000 subscribers. This career is a blessing for sure. And yeah, stay tuned. We got some cool projects coming up. We love you guys, and God bless. Redbeard's Garage is powered by GoPowersports.com. Go Power Sports has a huge amount of awesome go-kart and mini bike parts, and when making your purchase, use the Redbeard discount code in the upper right hand corner of your shopping cart to grab yourself a sweet deal. Hit that subscribe button and make sure the notification bell is on so you'll never miss another episode, and go check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and Pinterest to stay up to date with the channel. Guys, always come back to Redbeard's Garage. I'm out.